So we're coming to the first international part here on the stage. We have our international star guest, VIP. To say that you are some guy doing role playing is really not enough.
But I am.
You are. But to give a short introduction of what I know about you, you were one of the youngest employees Games Workshop ever had.
Sure.
You began your work in Games Workshop quite in the early days.
Yep, I did.
You ran one of the most successful Games Workshop shops in Scotland.
In the company.
In the company.
Excuse me.
And you've done maps for some of the most influential games in our industry.
I have.
So you are a veteran.
Yeah, I designed the current version of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay as well. I do maps for Critical Role, Warhammer, Call of Cthulhu, a bunch of other fun, exciting things. And I also roleplay live online like an idiot every single week for Lawhammer, where we just play online like the fools that we are and enjoy ourselves immensely, because that's what role-playing games are all about. I'm not one of those people that create games and don't play them. I create games and play them every single week, every single day. I've produced board games, I've produced war games, I've produced role-playing games, I've produced all sorts of games, because ultimately I've been a gamer since I was a kid. And I have continued to game throughout all of that time, because that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's what I do. I make and play games. It's what makes life fun for me.
And you have a fantastic life story to tell, which is very entertaining. When did you and how did you start working for the role-playing industry?
For the role-playing game industry in particular, or for Games Workshop?
Let's start in the beginning.
Okay, in the beginning, I was born. A bit more realistically, I had parents who were really into science fiction and fantasy. I grew up with a library that was enormous, filled with all of the great classics that most of us probably know, ranging from sci-fi classics from the 60s to your Tolkiens and your Moorcocks, all just sitting there alongside the Vances of the world, waiting to be read. And my parents were avid book pushers, like drugs. Read, 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 and I read. But they weren't just into fiction. They were also into games. And whether that was, to begin with, the almost inevitable monopoly, it was also role-playing games. And I had my first role-playing with my parents. I'm not one of those kids that started off with their friends and went everywhere on bikes and fought monsters, Stranger Things style. I was someone who was doing it with their parents and my grandmother. We played our first role-play games when I was but 8. My brother was 4, also playing, not really contributing much beyond making lots of noise, but certainly having fun. My grandmother, who clearly didn't understand anything at all, named her character D'Artagnan because D'Artagnan was something she recognized, and most of the time just went, I don't know what I'm doing, but we had fun. The most important part for me was that my mom was an artist by profession. And she did art when my dad, who was a lighthouse keeper, would go away for a month and come back for a month, and go away for a month and come back for a month from the lighthouse where they worked. And my mum would be steeped in doing oil paintings, sketches, local craft fairs. So when she became a GM, it wasn't a matter of simply trying to tell the story that was in the book. She drew all the pictures. And she drew the maps herself out of the book because she didn't want to hold up the book because she was reading it because she was very unsure about being a GM. So she drew it all herself. And this was obviously in the days before we could just scan things or just copy them out. So she drew them all herself and changed them according to the story she wanted to tell, because she was doing it for her kids, which means it's got a slightly different focus than when it does for adults. So she removed the bits she wanted to remove and added more blood and gore because we were boys. That really went down well with my grandmother. She loved that. So that was my first proper introduction, and I loved it in ways that I can't really express. And because of that, I then introduced it to my friends. And because of that, not more than maybe, I'd say a year or two later, I owned every Games Workshop game that existed. I owned every army that they had. All my friends were role-playing weekly because I was role-playing weekly and gaming on top of that as well. So by the time I was 10 years old, I had literally everything. And I was an avid reader. Were we playing it wrong? Yes. Were we kids who were just having fun? Yes. But we were creating worlds. In truth, the roleplay that we were playing then was much less about the rules of the books and what those books meant to us as a feel, as a general tone, what they conveyed with their art, what they conveyed with their stories that they were suggesting. And that became probably the core of what became my Warhammer love affair as Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay was released, the first edition of it. And I never stopped or looked back. By the age of 12, I decided I was going to work for Games Workshop. By the age of 15, I'd left school so that I could work for Games Workshop. Now, that might not sound clever, given that, hey, surely results are going to help. No. I had a plan. I went to the local college because I knew that they granted money for going to the college because you got a grant. And I went, oh, well, I've left school. I'd like to go. I was a straight A student. My teachers loved me quitting out. I went over to the college and I went, hey, give me your money. Phoned out Games Workshop and said, I'd like to open a shop, please. I've got money. And Games Workshop went, how old are you? 15. No. Well, perhaps, I understand what you're saying, but here's what I'm doing. And I sat on the phone for them for ages, and eventually I got passed through various people until eventually I was speaking to Ronnie Renton. Now, if you know anything about the UK game scene, Ronnie Renton currently runs Mantic Games. But at that point, he was the head of direct sales in Games Workshop. And to quote him, which he said to a 15-year-old, "You're a mad bastard, Andy." He said, yeah, sure, you can have an account, but you have to pay for everything up front first. And we have to do this very carefully. And can you put your parents on the phone to make sure that they're okay with this? So he chatted to my parents, and my parents were like, yeah, we told them to do this. Because my parents were just as crazy as I was. And within a few months, I had opened a shop. I had a games club with over 100 people. And over the course of the next 2 years, I developed that into me owning every single army that was there, because I had a massive discount because I was buying Games Workshop at retail prices, and selling to around about 150 people. Now, to give you an idea of what that means, I wasn't in a city. I wasn't even really in a town. I was in a village at the very top of Scotland. I lived in a lighthouse. There was no one near me. The local town only had about 7,000, 8,000 people in it. And we all gathered there in a scout hut, which is where everything was run from. So Boy Scouts. And by the time I arrived at Games Workshop at age 18, I already had 3 years of experience running a retail outlet. I had been designing games using their rules because for 3 years I've been building scenarios, running games with over 40 or 50 people in one game. So one big war game. I'd run role-play events with people, with as many as 50 players in a single event. And that was by the time I was 18. When I went to Games Workshop, I got an interview in Aberdeen, which is a city in the north of Scotland, over in the east coast. It was the closest shop to where I lived in my lighthouse. And I came down to Aberdeen, and I came in a suit. I cut my hair, which had been down to my waist. I cut my hair really short, so I looked super professional, because Games Workshop in that era clearly didn't need long hair. Everyone had long hair, but whatever. And I sat down, and I was just a kid. I was 18 years old, just turned 18. I applied the second I was old enough. It's worth saying I had been doing stuff for them before then. The second I could, I was there. I was sitting there terrified. And they sat down, and I think his name was Simon Butler, and he interviewed me. He was the area manager for the northern section of Games Workshop. And I said, I own all of your armies. I have run this. I have done this. I have run roleplay events. I have done that. I did a convention last week. We had It wasn't that many. It was like 300 people, but for an 18-year-old kid, that was a lot. And I have done this and I have done that. And he just went, what? What? Yeah. I run games every week for around about 50, 60 people. I do this. What? You've got every army? Yeah, here. And they couldn't believe it. Didn't offer me a job. He offered me a second interview, which was going down to Games Workshop's head office and being interviewed by everyone. So I arrived at the head of retail first, a chap whose name was Rob Griffiths at the time. And I sat down with him and I brought a Space Marine helmet with me because my mum made it. And I popped that on the table. It's a big Dark Angel helmet. And they went, what the? He made out of paper mache. And it was brilliant because my mum was an artist. And she passed that over to them. I said, it's for you. It stayed in there for 7 years, bless them. And the head of retail had a chat with me, couldn't believe I was real, passed around multiple people, is this guy real? I ended up getting interviewed by Ronnie Renton as well, at the head of sales. I got interviewed by the studio, by Rick Priestley and by someone else who I can't remember. I then went over to mail order, got interviewed there. I basically went around the entire company and I stayed there for a 1 week term. I got put up in their company house. And then at the end of it, the head of retail said, you can work anywhere. Anywhere you want in the company. You choose. It's up to you. I was a kid. I was a kid. What do kids do in that? The obvious answer was, work in the studio, Andy. That's where you should go. I didn't choose that because I was a kid and I was scared of moving away from home. So I said, I want to work in the closest place to my parents, please. And I got really filled up because I was scared of moving away from home because I was just a kid. 18 is very old for some people, but I lived in a lighthouse. The idea of moving down to some city in the middle of nowhere was terrifying. Now, the closest shop to me was Aberdeen, the shop where I'd first been interviewed. Couldn't work there. It was a tiny little shop, and they said so. No, Andy, we're not going to let you work there because you'll be wasted. What are you even thinking? So I went, fair enough. Well, where then? And actually, they could see I was breaking. Because I was upset that they wouldn't let me work close to my parents. They went, well, the biggest shop in the companies in London, we can't, that's further away. Edinburgh's currently like number 4. So Edinburgh, you can move to Edinburgh. Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay, Edinburgh's okay. That's in Scotland. And thus I ended up working for Games Workshop in Edinburgh. I ended up managing that place, becoming an area manager and quitting because I had made an enormous mistake. But I didn't really, because I love Edinburgh and I met my wife there and I've got my kids there and my entire life wouldn't exist if I hadn't gone there. But my heart loved games design. I loved selling games, which is what I was doing for them. I loved playing games, which I was also doing, and painting miniatures and doing all that hobby stuff. But I loved making games so much more and actually doing something bigger. So when they restructured the company, I quit. I actually quit from them twice because they headhunted me back. But that's a whole story. I went to a few other games companies until eventually I just turned freelance. And the second I turned freelance, I never stopped to look back. And the primary reason for that is that throughout all of that time, I was gaming. Now, I presume most of you, all of you are probably gamers. And when you're gamers, you make stuff for your games. You just do. I'm a bit special. I make a lot of stuff. I make entire extra games for my games. I'll make entire war games to play inside my role-playing game because role-playing games often don't have good war mechanics or building a massive battle. So I'll just make up a set of rules for that and away we go so that we can run that role-play game at the side as a board game as the role-playing game's going on with the individual player interactions. I've been doing that, but I'd also been doing maps. I had been doing illustrations. I had just been doing everything. So when it came to doing it potentially freelance professional, I had years of experience, even though I was still relatively young. And it meant that when the second edition of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay came out, I had worked a little bit in the first, a little bit in the side with James Wallace. But when the second one came out, I was in their forums. I had already written my own second edition version of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay at that point for my own players. That's the sort of guy I was. When I found out that Chris Pramus, who's also at this con, by the way, I'll be on a panel with Chris tomorrow over in the main hall at the high school. When he announced that he was doing the second edition of the rules, I basically went like that with mine. I went, excellent, someone else is doing all the hard work. Then it got released, and I went, no! There was a whole host of things that I thought could be done better. So I dropped into their forums and went, you know what? Here is a very long constructed argument for why you've made some errors. 3 weeks later, I got an email from them saying, would you like to be a moderator so that you no longer are criticizing us really intelligently? Because we don't want this in our forums. I was like, sure, I'll be a moderator on the inside, speaking to all the staff. This is why everything isn't working well. They released a book relatively early about the Empire, and I had enormous criticism about its map. So I sent them a map, and I said, I did this last night. Just last night. And I think it's better than what you've got. 1 week later, I got an email from the art director of Green Ronin, who were doing that edition, and went, hey, Andy, would you like to do the maps for the next book? I was like, sure, I'll do that. That, however, wasn't my first gig for Warhammer. My first gig was actually writing the roleplay game, for the roleplay game, because my criticisms of the writing were so much that they just went, here, Andy, go. But I wasn't just criticizing, I'd also released by that point around about 50 pieces of fan material. Just popped it up, all for free. Away you go. If you want to use it, use it. And I used their rules exactly. I used Chris's rules exactly. Because it wasn't designed for me or my group. It was designed for people who were playing the game. And that meant that they had to use the actual rules that were available to them. And that was good. I did a bunch of Warhammer things, and I've never, ever approached anyone for a job since then. I just got given job after job after job. The one arrived after the other. And within 10 years, I had won awards for cartography, I'd won awards for writing, I'd won awards for games design, and I didn't really see any of them because most of them were in America. And I was in Scotland doing my own little thing, sending it to them. Oh, bashing mics as I go, enthusiastically. Sending it over to them, and then them saying, hey, Andy, you just won an Ennie. Have I? Oh, thanks. Would you like us to send anything? Is there anything to send? Not really. Until later on, they started doing medals. I don't know if you've ever seen the Ennie medals, but they're basically gold medals that they send out to everybody that's got one. And they backdated it. So I got all of mine in a oneer. And I got this package with 29 medals in it. And I was like, what is this? Which was fun. We had to pay for that ourselves because they weren't free, but my wife paid for that. It was super nice of her. She sent that over as a gift, showing all the stuff that I'd done. And I was like, oh, I've done quite a lot. And then since then, I ended up running Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay as the producer, line developer, art director, the whole lot. I've done things like Map for Critical Role, mapping for them right now, actually, for their new campaign. And I now own my own company. Hey, I've got a game, you should go buy that. Let me just bring that out because it's always good to tout. It's not selling properly in Europe because Modiphius are selling it, not me. Because I'm selling it through them.
A bit of a problem.
Yeah, tell me about it. But let's just not get into that whole weeds. Modiphius are doing it. You can order it directly from modiphius.co.uk. Not anywhere in Europe. Well, the EU. It's a freaking gorgeous game. Feel free to come up and have a look at it. It's lovely. It's got artwork from Mark Gibbons, who used to be one of the studio's primary artists at Games Workshop, and my very close friend. And he's worked for Sony. He did all of the original concepting for Warcraft. And Andy Chambers also helped write that. If you know anything about Warhammer, you'll go, oh, yeah, him. If you don't, it's just a name. He's a guy. He made a game. And I wrote the rules for that one and produced the game. But yeah, I've got my own company. I now stream every week, as I've mentioned at the beginning, with Warhammer, where I play Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, the game I designed, every single week. I also stream for Inside the Rookery, where I speak to people like Ian, and indeed anyone inside the industry for a podcast. And I also do, because I do so much, a stream called Lorebeards, which is just discussing Warhammer lore online, which has become, strangely, the best paying gig of my life. What the hell? Just chatting online about stuff that I wrote, maybe as much as 20 years ago, and that is apparently where modern money is made. I make more money than that than the games that we actually make, which I'm never stopping making, by the way, even if it only makes 2 cents, because I am very much a game maker. Wow. There you go.
I always like interviewing you because I ask one question and 26 minutes.
There we go. 2 questions today. Okay,
Yeah,
I'll be more concise next
No,
time.
please not. Please not. From all the work you did, and you did a lot as we got to know, what would you do? What would you say is the thing that is closest to your heart?
Okay, this one's actually quite easy, and it ties directly to Chris as well, which is good for this con. There's many that are close to my heart, and it is like picking between your children, which of course we can never do. But I'm picking one. And that's probably the Freeport map. It's not the most famous map in the world. It's not the most impressive either, if I'm being honest. Definitely not the first one I did. The second one's better. But I was approached by Green Ronin and Chris directly to map their Freeport setting, which is their YR piratey setting, which was for D&D when the open license very first came out. He did the very first open license games, and the very first Freeport came out for that. I came in for the second edition. And they brought me in because I'd been working for them on Warhammer quite a lot. And it was the first one where the art director, Hal, if you don't know Hal Mangold, he's amazing over at Green Ronin. I love him to bits. Hal said, hey, Andy, we're not even going to give you notes, just we need a map of the city. So can you do one? That's it. And I was like, okay, sure. Give me everything, because I want to read everything to make sure everything that's in those books is in the map. And he was like, everything? There's like quite a lot of books. I was like, just give me them all. So I read them all, found out that the map that they had already was just missing so much. There's just so much had been created over time that just wasn't on. Plus the map that they had was also wrong. It contradicted their own text. So I said that to them. Do you mind if I just make it work? And their reply was, that's why we're asking you to do it, because we know you're really anal and you will make it right. And I did. Popped it over to them. And that was the first time that Green Ronin felt, yeah, we're popping this one in. And it won my first mapping any. It wasn't the only map in there. There was a couple of other maps that I did in there too. But it was the city map in particular that was marked out as winning. And it was the first time that I had been recognized for my artwork on anything. On the writing, a couple of times, but they were shared things. There were writing awards that I had contributed maybe a quarter of the words to, or a fifth, or something like that. I was a co-author. This was just something that I just did because I wanted it to be done that way. And thus, it holds a very special place in my heart, because the thing I wanted to do my way was the first one that got the actual proper award. And I was like, yeah, yay. So it makes me feel like a child to this day. It's very good. So there you go.
That was short.
I told you, I'd be more concise second time. I tried.
So you worked with the big guys.
Yeah.
Most people here know people like Will Wheaton, Matt Mercer. You worked together with. How is it working with Critical Role?
Critical Role are great. They're one of the best partners I've ever worked with, and they didn't pay me to say that. There's a reason they're great. It's because they trust me in a way that some people who are hiring you for the first time just don't, because they don't know who you are. They come in with a lot of expectations from previous work that they've had. I don't know if any of you know the creative industry as a whole, but it is notorious for missing every deadline known to man. And I don't. I'm a professional. I work to standards because I'm quite anal about certain things. I was speaking to Matt relatively early in the Tal'Dorei setup, so I helped build its first shape and exactly how it came into place. And he was just, much like anyone, just a keen GM who wanted his stuff to be made into something cool. And he was a little surprised that they had the budget to do it, little realizing exactly where Critical Role was going to go. And as it got bigger and Critical Role expanded, they brought in people who similarly were fans. And I was, in some regards, one of the old crew. So whenever I got brought in, I was the grey now example inside the crew. For example, when the Tal'Dorei second edition book, revised edition came out, there was a big party, which was all online because it brought artists from across the world of all different types and stripes together. By the gods, I was the oldest. by an enormous amount. There was me sitting inside this party, enormous number of faces, all chatting away, me being me. I'm happy to talk to anyone. And I was chatting on, and all these kids, many of whom were tiny, going, hey, I got a bit of art into the book. So it was my job to basically feed all of them in. And that was fun. But yeah, I'm somewhat of an old hand, but they're great to work with. There are different types of work. One of the downsides of being respected is sometimes they don't give you great broad notes. So you kind of have to just judge it yourself. As you mentioned, Will Wheaton. I will quickly mention the Will Wheaton design brief because it's always worth mentioning.
This is
Will
so
Wheaton
funny.
design brief.
This is such a funny story.
It's not. I mean, it is.
I like it.
So again, Chris Pramus was doing the writing. So Chris, who will be with tomorrow, assuming you're here tomorrow, Chris was doing the writing for the game there. And Chris was beavering away doing stuff when Will got in contact and went, hey, Andy, I'm making Titan's Grave. Titan's Grave's awesome. And I was like, okay. And then he just went on for about half an hour about how awesome Titan's Grave was, telling me about all the monsters and things that had been built in it. And I was like, I realize this call is for a map, so how about details about places? Oh, we don't have any. Okay, right, gotcha. I wasn't sure that was true because Chris was writing the world. So clearly there must be something. But he's like, no, we don't have anything. We've got our initial starting area where we're going to campaign. It's a tiny thing. There's like 2 or 3 locations. Someone knows about that. I'll get them sent you. And I was like, okay. So I asked him some questions to try and pin down what it was that he wanted from this map. And the response was, it's your job. I was like, okay, so what do you want me to do? His reply was this. It was his brief. Go wild. Yeah, okay. Okay, go wild. Right. So I immediately emailed Chris. I've been told to go wild. I'm not sure that that's really going to help. And have you got anything I should include in the map? And then Chris somewhat weirdly said in reply, that largely sums up what he said. To which I said, I think I'll make it an island to begin because it'll add some borders and constraints. And he said, oh yes, we'll need some constraints. And I was like, okay, gotcha. Right. So I basically made up their entire world. And I had to do it in a week. So the map was done really fast. No, sorry, 2 maps were done really fast without the awareness of what their world was. I had the loosest sense. And a classic piece of LA thinking where concept comes first and then the concept inspires the actual art. So they do lots of art to inspire final product. Where the vast majority of RPG products are, I am the genius who has created all of this. It must be like this, as they provide you with everything that you need. So it was very different working for Will, and actually awesome. He's a really nice guy. And when it was all finished, he called me, and he was full of praise. And I was like, I have had a very busy week. Thanks, Will. Bye. and that was that. Fun job.
Yeah. So in the end, what is really important for me, and which we can tell everybody out there, that these are all just nerds.
Yeah.
So this is no geniuses.
No
wonderful angels falling down from the sky. This is just...
We are all geniuses, every single last one of us. We are all spinning beautiful worlds of absolute creativity and beauty at home. And all of us, to better or lesser extent, depending on your individual capabilities, are just amazing. And the people who are up here, the people who are behind the scenes, the people who are creating, are often just the ones who chose to risk their career. The ones who went, I've got a thing that I must show other people, and couldn't stop themselves. And for many, that meant financing something they couldn't afford to do. For many, it meant time sinks that they also couldn't afford to do. And some succeeded, some do not, go straight back to their office job. There is a difference between the genius of creation and editing a good book, producing a well-structured product. That's very different. But I have no doubt that the vast majority of people here, and indeed in this con in general, could probably produce just as much genius, just as much awesomeness as comes from everybody else. My job is often facilitating other people's dreams. If I take, for example, Xeogenesis, which is a miniature battle game that was produced by one of the Epic's employees. He used to do a lot of stuff. It was a vampire back in the day, Vampire the Masquerade, I think. But regardless, he came and said, "Hey, Andy, we've got a ton of stuff, but we don't have a book. Help." And it was my job to channel the creatives who were doing the writing, who were doing the rules building, and pull it all together into an actual product. That's the bit that I feel is hard. Building good products. That's hard. And because we're a hobby industry, many of the people involved in this industry aren't that great at it. We probably all got our own bugbears about a bad translation, about a very badly proofread book, about editing that makes no sense. But that's because of the very nature of our hobby. We are all hobbyists. And that sometimes doesn't matter. Sometimes it does. My job has been, in the last 10 years at least, to add professionalism to products that might not yet have them. The products themselves are often amazing. It's just the polish isn't there. My job is the polish.
You stepped into editing, and working with other people's stuff. You've always also done, let's call it a world continuity for Warhammer.
A lot of, to summarize all of that up with just one little phrase, one of Warhammer's novelists, a chap by the name of Nathan Long, who was, because Microsoft are sacking everybody, who was the lead writer over at In Exile Games for Microsoft. He wrote the Gotrek and Felix novels, which, if you know Warhammer, are pretty famous. And at the beginning part of one, in the dedication at the beginning, it says, "To Andy Law, my native guide," which is, I think, sweet. Because I was providing him with all of the lore for the world. I became the IP guy, which is a way of saying that I was the one that knew the world more than anybody else. And every book that they produced for almost 15 years went through me first, on the Black Library side, which was nice. Nice. It was fun. I moved on from that job, went to do something else, as I often do.
What do you do now?
Okay, so I stream a lot now, which I never expected to do, ever. I'm online a lot, just either doing interviews or talking about Warhammer lore or playing Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay Online. I'm also the CEO of Rookery Publications, by our game. Rookery Publications. We have already written an entire RPG which has not yet been released because we are in a febrile time where releasing material and making money out of it is not as easy as either used to be or could be. There's lots of ways we could do it. We are undecided as the best route. But we've got an RPG game that's due to come out. We've got another board game. We've got lots of bits and pieces. But Dark Deeds is out right now. You can buy it.
I think it's fascinating. Every time we talk to each other, which is every several months, we say, "Well, I've got this project. What is about the old project?" We talk about, "Forget it. We got a new one." This is really funny.
Although the old projects always stay there, just wait for the right moment because they're done.
I'm really looking forward to your setting and rule.
I've got
free.
a finished book in my thing there. It's nice.
I have to see it.
I might show you a bit of it.
A setting free and rule free adventure, which works.
It's got a setting, but it's a setting that can be applied to any setting. It's fantasy. So you can slot it into any setting. Inspired by lots of games that did something similar, but we've gone further and we now have a complete rule set too. But it's a rule set that works in blocks that can be added to any rule set. So if you are playing, say, Call of Cthulhu, and you want to have rules for magic, it just fits in. If you are playing D&D and you want to have rules for insanity or some similar sanity mechanic, you can just add that on top, working in blocks. It's fascinating rules. It's been really fun to build because it's almost a culmination of everything that I've done for the last 30 years, which is add on to existing games. There is not a single game in the world that I'm happy with. Anytime I get a game, I'm like, "Oh, I wish they did that. I wish they did that." And I house rule it because I'm a perennial house ruler. And it's almost just a book of house rules that you can just apply in any game that best suits you. How to do a big war game. Here's an entire war game. Drop.
This is what we all do, but we don't do a book out of it.
Yeah, exactly. It's what we do.
Yeah.
And we're GMs do this. They adapt. And I think it's one of the great lies of many modern products where they have this expectation that you're going to run it the way it's written in the book. Who does that?
Nobody.
I mean, few. I mean, some adventures, one-offs, you might do. But the vast majority, even then, there's going to be bits you think your players will like. So you focus on those bits. And the adventure that we've written is largely written with that in mind. We fully accept that you might completely ditch all of it and turn it into something else. And it's something that happened particularly with our playtest. During our playtest for Ship of Fools, that's the finished book sitting in there, Ship of Fools, people turned it into Starship of Fools. They turned it into Steamship of Fools. They turned it into Landship of Fools, which was an interesting concept. They literally made it a big ship with wheels, which wasn't the landship I expected. Someone ran it in the Expanse, and it's a fantasy adventure, yet somehow they still managed to do it. And that's what we do with the adventures, pre-published adventures. We mine them for ideas. So deciding that that's what we're going to build, a mine that works for GMs rather than a fixed story that you have to work with. Yeah.
Are there any projects that you say, I always wanted to do this, and you haven't done?
Well, that's a toughie.
I know.
Yeah. Yes, one. I've got one. And I turned it down for the worst reasons. This was quite a while ago. Is when I was first setting up as a cartographer. I'd won a couple of awards, so people were contacting me, as was often the case. And one came up for Elric of Melniboné and a map of the Young Kingdoms from Mongoose Games, because they held the license at that point from Michael Moorcock. And I was a big fan of Michael Moorcock as a kid, as an author. And then I found out how much money they were paying. And it was less than a quarter of my normal fee. And I spent a week agonizing over it. Going, I want to do the map. I don't want to do it for no money because it sets a precedent. And they'll all come back to me expecting this much money. And I won't be able to say I didn't take that money because I did. I ended up not doing it and I regretted it for a long time. I have a similar one from a job from Modiphius when they were doing their John Carter of Mars game. I read pulp books as a kid. Edgar Rice Burroughs' John Carter of Mars was a big favorite of mine as well. They approached me for the job. I took the job. I laid out all the sketches, did all the bits. They were blown away. I was super happy. Then the next day I got offered the production job in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. So I had to send them an email saying, I think I'm going to take the production job. I'm sorry, don't give me any money. Take all my sketches and give them to someone else. And they did, and they gave them to Francesca Barol, as I recall. So we ended up with a really lovely map. Anyway, it was also my map, which is quite cool. But someone else did it. And I ended up taking the Warhammer job instead. But I regretted not doing those.
What will we see next?
That's a good question. I'm currently NDA'd up on the same thing we discussed not that long ago. Still going.
It's still going.
Still going.
No decision.
No decision. And I'm not even sure I want to do it anymore, but I really want to do it. There's an RPG gig that I really, really want that's currently sitting. We've got our RPG game, which is in a really good place, and I'm looking forward to that. And just catch me online, because I'm online all over the place. If you're not interested in Warhammer, which I'll admit is a strong focus of mine just now, we do have Inside the Rookery, which streams every single week. And we just speak to people across the games industry. Indeed, a couple of the people here have agreed to come on already. So some of the people here will be popping up over the course of the beginning. It'll be the beginning of next year because we're booked up all the way through. But we stream Inside the Rookery every single week. We have about 150 episodes up there with just people from across the industry about everything from world building to, well, everything. Games industry related. You were on once.
Yeah. I will come to Scotland. It's just in my plans.
Yeah.
To just be an NSC.
Yeah, quite.
In one of your episodes.
I would love for you to come onto one of our episodes. It'd be amazing.
I play someone with a strange German accent.
It's very strange for Warhammer.
Yeah.
They all have British accents in Warhammer.
Yeah.
For fantasy Germany.
I've got
British.
a real one. So, are there any questions you want to ask Andy? Then step up to one of the two microphones. You can ask whatever you like, but he decides if he wants to answer.
And I will try to be concise in my reply. We know that I am somewhat verbose. I'll try to keep my answers small.
Yeah, but it's always fun talking to you.
Oh, thank you very much.
What will your panel tomorrow be about?
I believe it's the future of RPGs, and I think I'm going to be pretty controversial with my views. I do recommend coming tomorrow because I might cause an argument.
Just okay. So, is there a future of RPGs?
Of course there is, because we rock. But let's leave it for tomorrow. I'm gonna. I might put the cat amongst the pigeons, depending on what the questions are like. So, does anyone have a question? Would you like to come up and ask?
Don't be shy.
I do know somebody asked quite a lot of questions beforehand. Yeah, shrink down there. Caught me outside.
Just step up to the microphone.
You're free.
We talk about.
Microphone's there.
There it is. He just wrote the question. Okay, on page 300.
How do you deal with digital maps for World Anvil, for example?
What do you mean by how do I deal with them?
Do you use them? Do you incorporate them in your games?
Okay, so first, for those of you who don't know what World Anvil is, it's a large online database made by some of the best people ever for GMs, storytellers, story builders to present their entire worlds. And it includes everything from, it's big. It's got 1,000 features ranging from stories, NPCs, maps, everything you could possibly do. They run awards every year. I hosted their awards last year, which was really nice with my wife. We had an absolute ball. And it's a beautiful website. And it incorporates maps in lots of interesting ways in that you can put pins on it, which will give you information. You can put pins in it, which then move into other maps. And I'm not sure what the best way to answer your question is beyond simply saying, make some maps and load them up and then add the pins and add the details. There's not a great deal that's worth adding to that because the site itself does the vast majority of the heavy lifting. It makes it really easy. As it currently stands, I've been dabbling on the World Anvil side for Lawhammer as well. And I've not, somewhat crazily, not put maps up, even though I'm known for maps, largely because I want to do more. And Dimitros, who runs the coding side of it, I told him I was thinking of putting one up and it would probably have over 7,000 locations on it. And he cried. He was like, well, let's see if the software can cope. So, yeah, that's how I'm going to be using it. I'm going to be testing its limits.
Any more questions?
Well, that makes life easy.
Okay, so then I thank you for giving us your time. It was, as always, very entertaining.
Thank you very much. If you would like to find our deeds, you'll probably find it online somewhere. This is the card, which has a nice little go find us on the website side. And it should hopefully take you to Modiphius somehow or another if you want to buy it, which, of course, you absolutely should.
Yeah, we've tried to order it, but as always, when you order something at Modiphius, it can take up to 6 months or so.
Yeah, I'll shoot them.
Yeah, it's quite difficult. So then, thank you so much for your time, and thank you all for watching us. And next up will be the Golden Stefan, the prizes, the German. Yeah, it is. There's a story behind it, believe me. Which are the prizes for the best role-playing books and
nice.
So we have several categories. One will be
I'm
best
looking at potential Golden Stefaners, aren't I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes you will get one. One is the best game translation. Yeah. we separate it in German games and translated games.
Yeah, makes sense.
And there are other prizes, and there will be in the beginning there will be a prize for the life work, a special prize for a special person who will be awarded this prize. So we will just do our settings here, and you can do P or whatever, and don't forget to come back to the awards. That's it for now.